Welcome to the Accreditation Council of Trinidad and Tobago's first online conference in collaboration with the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. As you know, the theme of our conference is the future of online learning quality, best practices in artificial intelligence and competency-based credentialing. It is an honor and privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Senthil Nathan. Dr. Nathan, you are invited to proceed with your presentation.
Good morning, Mrs. Augustus. I'd like to thank you, everyone, the distinguished guests, and all the participants for your patience. I will try to give a very quick overview on the current state of play of artificial intelligence and micro-credentialing in higher education. So I'd like to check now if you can see the, can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can.
Very good, okay. So we'll take a very quick look at how AI, first of all, is being applied in higher education, and then we'll go on to micro-credentials. Just a quick, I'm an educator, I'm a teacher at heart. And there are many things as trained teachers, faculty members, practitioners we know. We know that our students have different learning styles, and I'm not going to go over that. It's just we know this by theory as well as in practice. But what we know is not what we do. We use typically just one method of delivering in traditional universities. We sometimes lecture to hundreds of students, even though they have hundreds of different learning styles. And we also know that active learning works. When students are doing something, they really learn. But what do? We just, even the most experienced teachers and professors, we just get into passive teaching. Most of us know that a passive listening can really work for 15 to 20 minutes. I think that's why they scheduled my talk for about 20 minutes. And beyond that, that's what happens, but we still keep doing it. We also know, especially as administrators, a large number of students drop out in their first years, and many students never complete their degrees. We know that. And as educators, we also know that one major reason for dropout is an academic reason. Students cannot really catch up. They are misfits or whatever the reason is. But we know that's one of the major reasons for dropout. So now coming to, given all that gap between what we know and what we do in higher education, artificial intelligence brings some promising options to address this gap. First opportunity that it provides is in personalizing learning for success of students with different learning styles and different learning paces. How do we do that? If we have systems designed to gather useful information about each student, their learning styles, their abilities, their successes and failures in the past, and their past academic progression information, details of their learning experiences, not just final grades, even information outside of the classrooms that may impact their learning, sometimes even personal issues, special needs, and so on. If all these data could be rolled into an AI engine to efficiently analyze and ethically inform the professors, as well as tutors and counselors, academic counselors, these professionals will have also suggestions from the AI engine to customize their teaching methods to better help a particular student. And personalized learning can not only help at-risk students to avoid or minimize dropping out issues, but also help advanced learners to complete their studies more quickly. And as we are speaking, this is all not science fiction, actually. Currently, there are some universities which are already piloting these AI intervention to help their students succeed. I've given a couple of examples. If you need, I'm sure you will get these PowerPoint slides, but if you need more details, you can always contact me. The one example in Georgia Tech is an AI class, AI course at the master's level, and this has been going on for 4 years. But the first year when the professor introduced this, bot, basically a tutor, was answering all the students' query over 24/7, and the students did not know it was a bot. They thought it was a teaching assistant, and it's been a success. So there are examples for intervention. The second application of AI in higher education is actually helping the students get into the right college, in the right program, at the right time. This is a challenge for millions of students every year around the world. And AI-driven chatbots can certainly add elements of efficiency both in the admission process as well as in scheduling classes for each student. And as I have shown you, many chatbots are already doing this job in the universities. Another emerging area in AI in higher education is the application of blockchain in higher education. Blockchain can help keep student records in a seamless, borderless form for the entire life of the student. It ensures faster credit transfers, stacking of microcredits, which we'll see later on, and even Bitcoin type of cyber currency transaction for fee payment. And actually, with the right use of blockchain, it can pave way for students to gain credits across many universities and institutions over a period of time to get their academic credentials. And so if a student has all that on a blockchain, every stakeholder can access this verified information in a very quick way, rather than floating around, papers floating around and CVs and so on. So that's one of the pictures that we have in how blockchain related information on academic success as well as learning and training success of students can be accessed by all kinds of stakeholders. So finally, when I was asked to address both artificial intelligence and micro-credentials, both these topics together in one talk, first I was wondering, how can I connect these two things? First of all, it's a lot of material, but as I started thinking about it, it became quickly apparent as I began to appreciate the big picture. It's both are about the learner's success in his study as well as in the real world, in career, after that person completes his or her credential. So as we saw AI applications a little bit about, they were all about student success, whether it's in learning, admission, scheduling, credential transfer, all about student success. It is not just about simplifying work of the universities or agencies. Similarly, as we are going to see in a few minutes, micro-credentials are also about learner success in gaining relevant skills quickly for career progression or reskilling for new careers in the fourth industrial revolution workplace. We call it Industry 4.0. So before I quickly get into micro-credential, this is a provocative quote from Ernst & Young. Basically, in the next 10 years, they say 40% of existing university degrees will be obsolete, and traditional undergraduate or postgraduate degrees could completely disappear within a decade. Now we can argue about 40% or a decade, but I don't think I want to argue about the essence of this statement. So as educators, as professors, as accreditors, we have to understand this train is going. Either we catch on or we are left behind. So very quickly, I would just give you a little bit of my take on why do we need micro-credentials. And basically, Industry 4.0 is fast evolving. And the current pandemic has only made it even faster. And it's challenging the traditional degrees. Now, many of our degrees, if not most of our degrees, they don't prepare our students for the world of work anyway. On top of that problem, existing problem called skills gap, Industry 4.0 world of work demands new competencies. It's projected by a World Economic Forum report, as Dr. Ali mentioned, several millions of existing jobs will become redundant soon, and they are actually, this pandemic has made it faster, and completely new type of jobs, millions of them. There's an estimate about 78 million. They will soon emerge in the next few years. And as we all mentioned, COVID-19 is making this projection faster and sooner than what the governments and the businesses expected. So I would think that most of us would know what micro-credentials are, but if you're not familiar with the definition, here is a very quick brief what this is. Basically, short learning programs, as the European call it. They are a group of courses with a common theme, which are part of larger credentials. In the old days in UK, we had ordinary national diploma, ordinary national ONC, OND, HND, and so on, very similar. And micro-credential is one example of a short learning program. It is actually a subunit of a credential that could accumulate into a larger credential or be part of a portfolio. And there are many words used in the industry: verified certificate, digital badges, micromasters, nano degrees. I'll just call them badges because it's just simple. And the basic concept of a micro-credential is it's clearly soft and hard skill focused, not knowledge focused. And earning a micro-credential basically means we have the whole idea, I mean, of micro-credential is more structured and thoughtful than typical training or learning development activities that happen in industry. Similarly, it's more than how universities structure their curriculum. You have general education, core courses, electives, things like that. Because the idea of training is embedded in the design of the micro-credential in terms of focus on employable skills and competencies as credential outcomes. At the same time, the idea of education is also embedded in terms of assessment rigor and credit towards academic credentials. This kind of marriage between, it is actually not new to vocational colleges and applied universities, but the micro part may be new to those colleges as well. But for traditional universities, these ideas are fairly new and possibly strange. So there are three things in this whole list I want us to focus: affordability, access, ease of access, and flexibility. These are very important factors for today's learners and tomorrow's learners. So I'll give you some numbers. I like to put things in a context. This is just from a US perspective. There's an organization called Credential Engine in the US that counts distinct and unique post-secondary credentials currently offered in the States. And many of these are offered even online to international market. In this list out of 692,000 distinct post-secondary qualification, 190,000 are unique micro-credentials or badges offered currently in the US. That's 27% of all distinct post-secondary credentials offered in the States. And strangely, MOOCs, Coursera, edX, and others, they offer only less than 1% of these. The rest of them are offered by different players. The other surprising factor is most of these are not offered by colleges or universities. So there's a lot of them. So this, you will understand now why we now have to think about quality framework. Because the more we stay out as educators, accreditors, and colleges and universities, there's going to be more confusion. So before we all jump into the bandwagon of offering badges, microcredits, nanoding, all this stuff, we need to understand how we can do this right. I do believe that there must be more thought and more efforts given to designing these badges than what we academics do when we design courses or modules for our typical degrees. Today, now there are at least a couple of serious efforts to develop a quality framework to design and deliver micro-credentials. I'm showing you the one developed by Rutgers University in the States. And there's one more. In terms of how to do this right, there are 4 categories that Rutgers want the designers to address, these course designers. One is credential design. The other one is competencies and outcomes, and market processes and outcomes. Now, of these 4, competencies and outcomes may be more familiar to academic program designers, curriculum designers, typical designers, than the other 2. You see, as the academics, we come up with the module or course outcomes and graduate outcomes. But do we really know what the employers what kind of outcomes do they need? Do we even engage the employers while we design these outcomes? Now, when it comes to micro-credential, we cannot afford to be slack because both the learners and the industry will quickly give their feedback and make our badges either resounding success or total failures. If we don't pay close attention and constant attention to the market processes in our credential design, it could be a disaster. Accessibility is especially particularly online course design. When I'm talking about micro-credential, it's most of the time it's about online access. It will be integral to, so you don't think about it later. The online course design should be integral to micro-credential design. Affordability would also mean that we need to design these courses for larger classes in combination with the use of chatbots, peer tutors, and the like. And Coursera and the MOOCs are already doing it, so this is not rocket science. As the standards come into play, I do expect a number of current badges will be out of the market because they won't stand the test. So again, a few more comments on how to do this, how do we design and deliver it right. Universities, traditional universities, I'm always worried about them. They need to provide faculty development, as well as they need to help them with industry liaison departments, individuals, because our current faculty members, to do this right, they have to work with the industry, which is not easy. It's time consuming, and it could be frustrating for both sides initially. But as faculty, you have no choice. Accreditors also must demand the evidence for effective industry engagement before they approve a micro-credential. And even to renew, they have to look at ongoing engagement with industry. Otherwise, this will not work. So at the same time, major employers, they can't simply stand back and expect graduates to show up at the door with the right skills for Industry 4.0. I'm just showing a couple of good examples. On one side is Adobe. They are providing excellent financial help for their staff to upgrade. On the other side, IBM has been very proactive. They are offering their badges proactively, not only to their staff, but to the market itself. And on the part of universities, there are now today forward-looking universities across the world. They are on the move. It's a small fraction of universities, but I believe these universities will establish supremacy in the next decade with their early move advantage. So if you are from a university or a college listening to this, I think you should get on it with this. And here are some of the example consortiums in Canada. The government itself has taken initiative. There's a consortium in US, University Learning Store, and Future Learn, which actually brings in universities from UK, US, Australia, and Ireland. So these are some good examples. And I'm almost coming to the end. The role of governments and accrediting agencies and what ACTT is doing is a really exceptional initiative today. Obviously, the governments have a vested interest in ensuring that employment of their graduates, their nationals. Once again, many governments are becoming more proactive in this area. And when the governments get active as an extension, because most accrediting agencies are actually government agencies, there is now interest and pressure on these accrediting agencies also to establish standards for accreditation and get moving. I will showcase New Zealand's example as a first mover. I've always been impressed, not just now, I've always been impressed by the quality assurance initiatives of New Zealand in higher education for the last 2 decades I've been watching. Now they have actually established standards. They have started moving since last year. I think EU, European Union, and Australia are following suit, but US is a different case. This is an example of New Zealand quality assurance, micro-credential quality standards. So they clearly say what kind of evidence they are looking for. One other thing I would mention, sometimes accrediting agencies take a lot of time. Time is of the essence for micro-credential, because if you take 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, that micro-credential may become irrelevant. Learners, lastly, what responsibility they must take. You know, they have to take a serious responsibilities. I'm saying learners deliberately. This could be young students after high school, or those who are in their 20s and 30s. The young learners and their parents particularly, they might still be living in a world of degrees and diplomas and things like that. This is also true in emerging economies, where degrees are often associated with social status. In this context, fresh high school leavers must really familiarize themselves with the micro-credential options for Industry 4.0 jobs. So I think the high schools have a role to play in making them familiar. Similarly, those who are working and they are in their 20s and 30s must seek to reinvent themselves for new economy with these micro-credentials. So that's kind of a summary of where all the stakeholders work together with their respective role. The idea is learner success. It's not about making money. It's not about making a point, but everybody in this, what I'm showing here, we work together. So at the end, as I conclude, I believe countries and industries, institutions, universities, they must have a proactive vision. You don't want this to wait. Industry 4.0 disruptions are here, and they are now. And as I said, many millions of jobs will be lost. But society or governments cannot wish these away. And so we need proactive visionary policymakers across the board, because youth unemployment and increasing class divide, developing countries, emerging economies, this could be dangerous if you are not proactive. but there could be serious social disruptions. So it is absolutely essential that policymakers are moving forward. And for higher education in particular, we can either embrace it or resist it. But if AI is diligently introduced into the human development, I think that those societies, I really hope, I wish the best for Trinidad and Tobago and the whole region to be proactive, and these societies will get ahead. So I'll stop here, and if there are questions, I think they will explain how to send the questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nathan, for taking us through that presentation. Certainly a lot of information for us to digest and to consider for policymakers, for strategists, for practitioners in education, as well as those in industry. We really appreciate your presentation this morning. We just want to take you through a few questions that have been posed to us at this time, and I'll go through them one by one, and I guess you can respond to them as you go through. Professor Goma asked a question or made a comment that multiple choice questions are easy to evaluate and give credit. So how will artificial intelligence assist us in evaluating answers to theoretical and numerical questions? That was a question. Okay.
I think it's artificial intelligence has come a long way. If some of you are using Grammarly when you're typing, it's just sitting at the back end. When your emails, whatever you do, every week I get a report. It tells me all kinds of stuff. It's got nothing to do with multiple choice. It's really smart. Same thing with you see these applications with Google. They observe you, they follow you, even when you're offline. So it is not at all multiple choice. That's not what AI is all about. That's actually dumb intelligence. That's a past. So AI is engines can be very smart, and they can actually look at your behavior. And if anybody wants to know what those kind of descriptive things it can do, if you just watch Grammarly, what it does.
Thank you very much. Another question from the United Arab Emirates. The point was made that the United Arab Emirates, particularly as are other GCC countries, have been evolving in the adaptations to technology, particularly with respect to artificial intelligence. The question is, are universities successfully adopting AI practices in teaching, research, or administration within the UAE? And could you give us an example if you know of one?
Sure. I think in research and development, definitely it's doing well, and industry applications, UAE is doing well. Recently, the very first AI university has been established in the world, actually in Abu Dhabi. It's Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed University of Artificial Intelligence. And similarly, on the industry side, also both Dubai and Abu Dhabi, the UAE is very, very active. I think academia and accrediting agencies are trying to catch up, and that's probably the sense I get in many countries.
Thank you very much. You made a very valid point that 78 million jobs will emerge very soon, given the transformations we are seeing in the job market or in industry. Do you recommend, therefore, a greater investment in external evaluation of micro-credentials as opposed to the traditional approach where we look at traditional qualifications by accrediting agencies? And if so, why?
Oh, definitely. I think accrediting agencies, if they don't engage industry, micro-credentials will not have validity. It really has to be, even among the academics that you use for evaluating, they have to have industry experience or industry engagement, consulting, academic research, and so on. Because the whole, the reason, Dr. Ali, is because the whole idea of micro-credentialing is for someone to get a job quickly or reskill, upskill themselves.
Good, thank you very much. And the last question I have You've referred to the NZQA, and at ACTT, we have been looking at that. In fact, we've been looking at the New Zealand system as you are, for the last 20, 30 years. What we've noted that the NZQA has mapped the micro-credentials to the existing national qualifications framework. However, we also note that given that micro-credentials are essentially shorter courses in duration and are not necessarily aligned to the existing qualifications you have in a qualifications framework, we're wondering if you would recommend having an alternative approach, such as having a separate national qualifications framework for micro-credentials.
Yeah, I wouldn't call that, Dr. Ali, as a separate qualification. As you know, in the States, you have a Bachelor of Science and you have Bachelor of Applied Science. I would say micro-credentials, typically, even if you stack them up, they would be more as an applied credential, like your typical HND or a Bachelor of Applied Science, than a research-oriented Bachelor of Science. I think, or a Master of Science. A research-oriented degrees should not be stacked up like this, because that's much broader and more integrated. But I think also it's not about existing qualifications. I think most of the micro-credentials will be addressing new skills anyway. So it could be, the design could be other way around. You build up micro-credentials and you try to build up a proper applied bachelor's degree or a master's degree that go with these micro-credentials. I think that would be the trend, at least for the next 4 to 5 years.
Good. Well, Dr. Nathan, again, thank you. And I've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Nathan in United Arab Emirates on particular projects. And I can tell you that it's really a pleasure working with him. And it's certainly a pleasure hearing you speak today. And we want to wish you all the best at your company and with all the relevant partners at your company as you proceed with your work in that part of the hemisphere.